Hello and good afternoon, everybody. This is the 5th episode of Shemakes Voices, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here with Dr. Valeria Valotto, who is the Public Affairs and Fundraising Manager and Vice President of QUID in Verona. QUID is a social cooperative that creates sustainable fashion. Valeria is in charge of developing QUID's fundraising strategy, and she also designs, implements, and particularly exciting for me as an evaluator, evaluates QUID's social impact programs. We're absolutely honored that Valeria is joining us this afternoon and that she is an advisor to the Shemakes project. Shemakes has received EU funding to empower future female innovators of the sustainable fashion industry through inspiration, skills, and networks. So in this 5th episode of our live interviews, with important women who we see as molding the contemporary textiles and clothing industry, we are speaking to Valeria about ethical fashion. And please feel free to comment, and we will try and get to your comments and questions live. I'm Kerstin Junge. I work for the Tavistock Institute, and I lead the evaluation of the Shemakes project, which means I measure its impact, and I'm a political scientist by training. So today we'll be talking to Valeria about her current work for QUID, how she got there, and the difference she's making to women working in the textile sector. Valeria, just a second, I'm so pleased to have you here. I'm sure this will be a super interesting conversation. And I just wanted to start off by asking you about QUID, which sounds like a fascinating organization. Can you tell me a little bit more about what QUID does and what its goals are?
With pleasure, Kerstin. Yeah, as you are saying, I'm connecting from Verona. Specifically, I'm connecting from Verona's public library today, so apologies for any background noise that might disturb us, but we are in amid organizing a big event for the 8th of March, so Women International Day, and that topic is really relevant to QUID because we are a social enterprise, and at the same time, we are a brand on a mission to redesign the labor market to make it fit women. And we're going to do that by redesigning Made in Italy fashion. In other words, we are a social enterprise, a social cooperative, creating employment opportunities as well as training and career opportunities for those who are most discriminated against on the national labor market. And this is more specifically women in our case. How we do that? We do that through fashion. We repurpose excess textile and excess fabric that we recover in partnership with over 50 brands and mills, both fast fashion and traditional fashion and luxury fashion brands. And we transform them in limited edition collections of clothing and accessories, which are distributed both B2B through a number of B2B partners for which we are solidarity sourcing partners and ethical suppliers, and B2C through our network of 10 stores. So 10 stores that are QUID stores. Our supply chain and value chain is quite complex and complete because we cover the entire value chain of fashion, from raw materials, which are, of course, recovered in a circular manner, in our case, up to communication and distribution. And on top of that, there is a small office, which is the office I'm in charge of, which designs training and empowerment programs, as well as monitoring QUID's environmental and societal impact. As social entrepreneurs, we believe that limits are starting points, and that's more or less how our business works. Where the fashion supply chain would otherwise end, that's where our collections come to life. And at the same time, where the labor market discriminates, that's exactly where we see and start cultivating talent.
That's
That's in a
I
nutshell
find
what I do.
it's a fascinating organization, and your role in it is no less fascinating. But tell me first your background, because you've got a training in classics and languages, don't you, rather than in fashion? So
Yeah.
what inspired you? How did you come to work in the textiles and clothing sector?
That's a good question. Well, I guess there is, in every Italian, there is a fashionista. And fashion and textile industry has really shaped the history and the past of the region I was born in. My great grandparents were tailors, and in the family we've always had a passion for fashion, fabrics, and design. But that applies to many Italians, to be honest. What took me to Quid was definitely the commitment to women empowerment. We were Quid is 8 years old, 9 years old in 2022. We're going to turn 9 in April. But back then, when I met Quid's founder Anna, it was amidst the 2013 financial crisis and credit crunch, and it was frightening for us as almost millennials. We were raised with the idea that the world was our oyster, would have been our oyster, and facing such a complex labor market wasn't really what we had expected. But nonetheless, we decided that we wanted to create a space and a working space, a workplace that would suit our needs and our values. And by doing so, we were also willing to help other women, not necessarily of our generation, maybe older, because we had seen the impact that the crisis had on our parents, and their peers, our relatives, older relatives. So it was really this feeling of sorority, I guess, that took me to Quid, and the idea that the difference could be made through fashion and through beauty, through something very creative.
Lovely. And
Fashion is transformative. What really fascinates me of fashion is it's transformative, but it doesn't only transform those who wear it; it transforms those who make it. It's yeah.
We'll come to that, I think, a little bit later, because it'll be really interesting to see how you do that in your organization, in your role. But I was interested to hear a little bit more about your role, public affairs and fundraising manager. How does that work in the organization? What do you do, and why is it important?
I boss around people all the time. No, of course not. We are a women-led organization. 80% is women, and 92% of the senior management. It's a very horizontal organization. Hierarchy. There is little hierarchical structure. To be honest, my role is really interesting. I work at the heart of Quid's mission, and I design training and empowerment programs for our trainees and for our employees, who are today 150. So it's quite a bunch, and quite a diverse bunch. 22 nationalities represented, even more languages represented and spoken. 70% from vulnerable backgrounds, and 40% with neuro or physical diversity. So it's very diverse, and we design empowerment and training programs covering both soft and hard skills. And at the same time, I design also all those development programs that apply to the performance of the organization itself. That in my capacity of fundraising manager. So any strategic growth program that applies both to infrastructure and to people, because any investment on infrastructures necessarily then reflects and has an impact on people, in our case. I designed those programs, and of course, I have a big stake in getting, in taking them off, so in making them land and happen in terms of fundraising, so finding the money to make to run the programs, and at the same time, in collaboration with external evaluators.
Mm-hmm.
We've put together an impact measurement framework that mostly for the social impact. Now we are working on the societal impact, so the impact that we have on society and on corporates through our B2C and B2B products. And at the same time, we are developing, but it's still at the budding stage, the environmental impact measurement program. So it's a role that really it's strategy. What I do is strategy, but since it's a very colorful and lively organization, then you will find me very often with getting my hands dirty, doing something, fixing something, having someone crying on my shoulder. It's very diverse as an organization, and I love that diversity of tasks as well.
It sounds absolutely fascinating and kind of really, really varied. And what interests me in the context of course, the Shemakes program is how sort of you yourself and your role, and of course your organization Quid, are completely embedded in an ethical way of working, ethical manufacturing, ethical. You used the word restructuring of the labor market. And I do wondered what your thought was on people's attitudes towards ethics in textile and clothing. Do you think people have become more interested in this topic in recent years? And if yes, why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I believe, first the world got global and then it got connected, and now it's easier than it was before to come across information and to look for information about where the products we use, the food we eat, come from. So while there is definitely an alienation element in globalization, the fact of being connected or possibly retrieving information very easily through Google or by browsing the web, then makes us feel closer and more connected also to the products and the services we use. And of course, storytelling also has a role. We are bombarded with all sort of storytelling, but I guess shopping has become more and more emotional and more personal. It's become a way to express one's values and one's personality, and as a result, I feel there is a very strong connection and drive, not only to look for products that please the eye, but also products that please the soul and nourish the soul. That's definitely the case with our clients.
And do you think this is something that appeals, if you like, or that is more significant to women than to men? It's interesting that you shared with us how high a proportion of your organization is female. And some of the words you used made me you associate perhaps the sort of female interests or qualities. I wonder whether you had any reflections on sort of the gender aspects of ethical fashion.
I think fashion is generally a sector where you find more women working at junior and middle management level than senior management. I'm not entirely sure. As usual, there is always a glass ceiling, the velvet ceiling in fashion, or something along those lines. But so, in terms of our organization, yes, it's mostly women. But in terms of clients and customers too, because we
Okay.
produce women fashion. So I guess that's the reason.
Okay.
Very easy. But at the same time, what I can tell you is that on a B2B level,
Mhm.
the corporates we collaborate with and senior management at the corporates we work with, we partner with, is 50% male, 50% female.
Mhm. Okay.
So maybe ethical fashion may attract more women than men, but ethical sourcing and it's something that I see as across gender, cross sex. I wouldn't say there isn't really a difference in approaching that. And
Okay.
again, my perspective might be biased because we produce women fashion. So
Mm. Mm. And do you think, from your experience, do you think ethical fashion can make a contribution to improving women's lives as workers and customers?
of course. Customers, once again, fashion transforms those who wear it. So, yes, and there are many ways of being ethical. There is also an ethical way of communicating fashion and communicating the female identity and female body. That's on one side. And then on the other side, of course, especially on a junior level and non-specialized or even specialized workers level. So the large basis, for instance, of our organization, uh, the majority is women employed and working for us. So in that respect, stricter corporate guidelines and more robust diversity and inclusion policies, especially if designed with a gender lens, which should be the case because the majority of manpower is woman power in fashion at a lower level, at a lower skills level or medium skills, then of course it can make the difference. I do believe, and this is what we try to do, of course.
And maybe some of the social programs you mentioned earlier aim to
Absolutely, we
support
work.
this. So I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that, and also maybe especially one
Yeah.
that you feel particularly passionate about.
Yeah. So we do so, and we strive to make sure that our employees can flourish on the workplace, despite the trauma that they sometimes bring with themselves, and they take to work every day, as we do. No, we bring our lives and our everyday with us at work. And when the trauma is deep, it's difficult to progress with training, and even to receive feedback can become really hurtful and painful if the feedback is not what we expected. So all our programs are built at the intersection of creativity and diversity and sustainability. Even the employment programs, where by sustainable employment, we understand employment that is sustainable in respect to work-life balance and in respect to financial independence. We work mostly on training and employment programs and on talent development programs. But at the same time, we don't only work on the vulnerable part of our workforce. We believe that the difference is made on both sides of the desk. So we are designing, we've co-designed with our employees an inclusive leadership program called She Will. And at the same time, we sometimes design programs targeting very specific, extremely vulnerable groups in our societies and communities. And in 2018, we launched Chrysalis, which is a training and empowerment program designed for survivors of human trafficking. And these colleagues, incredibly brave and incredibly resilient, have been trained in Quid by 3 specialized trainers. And at the same time, to facilitate the development of soft skills, self-awareness, and self-confidence, they took part in creative expression workshops. And then the two parts, the technical training and the empowerment program, merged in one product, which is a beautiful silk foulard called the Chrysalis foulard, which I have here with me. I promised.
You did, yes. Please show it.
Yeah, I did. I promised.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it really has all the stories and encouragement and keywords and dreams that both trainers and trainees shared on this journey. And it's really a testament to the fact that fashion can truly be transformative. And we've sold over 400 of these foulards. And the fact that 400 women are somehow sporting this beautiful piece of history and of stories around Italy, around the world, really makes me happy.
That's really amazing, and in a sort of interesting way, it makes me think about knowing the difference you're making, because part of your role is the impact assessment, isn't it? And what struck me from the stories you've told so far is the complex or intricate environment in which you work. You've talked about your supply chains, and you talked about some of your employees. And I wondered whether you could share a little bit kind of what you pay attention to when you think about and measure your impact, what aspects or what factors, and whether maybe you would consider the beautiful foulard almost as evidence of impact.
Of course, there was a whole host of indicators behind this foulard, from the sheer turnover it's created, which has all gone in financing training bursaries for future Chrysalis trainees, to more qualitative impact and quality. There was non-structured interviews and structured interviews held with both beneficiaries, so the trainees who contributed to the creation of the foulard, and their trainers. So how did they feel during the mood boarding sessions? What did they value about those moments? And they valued very different things, I can tell you. And again, the reach of the Facebook posts, the reaction of customers to the windows, to the shop windows where we showcased for over 1 week the foulard with an installation, with an artistic installation made by the trainees themselves. So we really look at the societal impact when we measure the impact of a product. That means, both the social and societal impact. That means the social impact, it's what we define as impact within our walls, within the walls of our organizations, but also grounded on people. And then we measure both quantitatively and qualitatively. Qualitative with the help of evaluators that we subcontract depending on the area we are focusing. In this case, it was an expert on human trafficking in this specific case of Chrysalis. And then quantitatively, that goes from the income, salary, independent living, financial self-sufficiency. And then it progresses from and goes to resilience, locus of control. So how resilient I feel, and whether employment has somehow had a stake in strengthening or weakening my resilience, because it can be both. Starting a new job can be incredibly stressful if one has been out of employment for quite some time. And then at the same time, when we look at societal impact, the idea is to measure the impact that the product has, and the product with its story has on B2B clients and B2C customers. And that it's necessarily done by interviews. Sometimes we train our shop assistants to not to measure, but to capture a few sentences and a few indicators, qualitative indicators, and then they transmit it to the impact measurer. And sometimes it's interviews, it's appointments that we make with corporates to test the impact. And then environmental impact, last but not least, but that's more complex to gauge in our case, because we need to work on the counterfactual. So how much CO2 would have we produced if we had bought or ordered that specific fabric from scratch? Because everything is, repurposed. So it's technically 100% sustainable, because no extra resources have been. But the environmental impact is a little bit more complex. So we are just starting to delve into it now, these days, these months.
Yeah, I can imagine that that's even more complex than some of the social and societal impact, which can also be quite tricky to figure out. I wondered what the interest in this information is. And in particular, I noticed that you are working with some quite big brands. So in part of your sort of business network, is there any interest in that data? And why do you think that is?
There is a lot of interest in those data, and of course, part of the interest rests in the possibility to communicate the impact that we've co-created and we've generated together, profit and non-profit organization. But at the same time, what we've noticed is that in many occasions, the impact is not communicated publicly, but it's instead communicated internally. So it becomes then an employee engagement, part of their employee engagement strategy. And then at the same time, what we notice from a board members' point of view is that there is, of course, an increasing commitment of corporates of measuring and reporting their own impact to auditors, to public bodies. And in that respect, we are a really important and in some way powerful stakeholder, despite us not being very powerful and being very small and still in a very small startup. But there is a lot of power in impact, and it's going to be the case more and more in the years to come. We need to use well this power, of course. You always have a choice on how to use your power, but we are committed to do so. Yeah.
I think that's a brilliant looking glass to the window for everybody who's into the future, rather who's involved in Shemakes, and leads me to the final question that I wanted to ask you, which is really about your vision for the mid or long term of ethical and sustainable fashion. What is that going to look like?
What is it going to look like? So in what we are seeing these days is the increasing interest of B2B brands. Well, no, sorry, of other brands in collaborating with Quid. So it's really the B2B business channel in our case, that it's really it's exploding. It's not flourishing; it's exploding these days. We can't quite keep the pace. So I think the future will be collaboration and hybridization and contamination. A good contamination. We've seen a lot of bad contamination over the last few years, but I think in this case it's the idea that non-profit and for-profit can work together and can learn from each other. There is a lot of mentoring as well that we are being offered by corporates and by for-profit corporates pro bono, and it's really helping us strengthen processes in our case. And at the same time, we're also launching our first transversal for-profit, non-profit program. We are going to launch it on the 8th of March. It's going to be the first international and European network bringing together under the same hat, under the same flag, profit and non-profit organizations in favor of the integration of migrant women on the labor market. And it's a network called Workplaces working with migrant women. It exists thanks to the support of DG Home of the European Commission. And that's what we are going to champion in the next few years, that together, for profit and non-profit, I won't say the good and the bad, because I don't think there is good and bad in profit and non-profit. I don't want to be this extreme. Absolutely, I believe there is really potential for contamination, and that's our vision, that we want to collaborate more and more on a social supply chain point of view, but also on a social impact level.
That sounds super exciting. I'm sure everybody will follow and stay plugged in to what you're doing. So I think this brings me to the end of our conversation already, Valeria. Thank you so much. This has been so interesting to hear about you and your work and your thoughts on ethical fashion. I can't thank you enough for giving us half an hour this afternoon.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you. Every time I'm being interviewed, I can think of something new, so it's great, and I connect to parts of me and to ideas that I had somehow forgotten. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you,
thank you everyone.
Brilliant, and we'll be back with more interviews as part of the Shemakes Voices series every month on the Shemakes channels. And for more information on how to find out how you can get involved in this group of women who are transforming the textiles and clothing industry, do check our website at shemakes.eu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kerstin, and everyone.